What happens when a crown, a flash of cameras, and a single glance can erase years of fame? Imagine walking into a room where history is being written on the heads of the elite, and suddenly, all your carefully built accolades, your Hollywood red carpets, your magazine covers, your interviews, seem to vanish under the glitter of a single tiara. That was the scene at the German state banquet, a night that would become infamous not for its diplomacy, not for the speeches or the political handshakes, but for a royal headpiece that changed everything. Kate Middleton, Duchess of Cambridge, stepped into the room wearing the largest, most breathtaking tiara of her life, and in an instant, Meghan Markle, the once unstoppable Hollywood princess turned royal, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, the scene might have looked like a typical royal gala. Chandeliers sparkling, guests whispering politely, photographers frantically trying to capture every angle of the event. But inside, behind the polished smiles and gloved hands, a silent storm was brewing. Meghan, accustomed to being the center of attention, the queen of the cameras, suddenly found herself in a new kind of spotlight, a light that revealed she was no longer the focal point. And it wasn't just the public who noticed. Insiders say the atmosphere was electric, charged with the kind of tension that could only exist when Hollywood glamour meets centuries-old royal protocol. The question isn't just about who wore what. It's about what this tiara represented. Power, influence, and a subtle message that resonated louder than any words ever could. In the world of royals, appearances are everything, and the German state banquet became a stage where history, politics, and personal rivalry collided. Kate didn't just wear a tiara. She made a statement. Every glint of its diamonds, every delicate curve of its design, told the world something Meghan had yet to fully grasp. Fame outside the palace means nothing once you step inside it. For Meghan, this was not just a fashion moment. This was a moment of reckoning. She had spent years building a narrative, positioning herself as a modern, relatable royal, someone who bridged the gap between celebrity culture and the monarchy. She was used to being adored for her work, her interviews, her charitable endeavors. But on this night, the contrast could not have been starker. Kate, steady, elegant, commanding attention with subtlety, effortlessly overshadowed Meghan's carefully curated persona. For anyone watching, the story was clear. Hollywood's bright lights cannot compete with royal tradition, poise, and symbolism. What made the tiara so powerful? Its size alone was staggering, but more than that, it was the history embedded in its every gem. This wasn't a headpiece purchased for a gala. It was a crown of heritage, an emblem passed down through generations, each diamond and sapphire a silent witness to the centuries of monarchy it had adorned. Wearing it was a reminder that royalty isn't about self-promotion, it's about legacy. Kate understood that, and the world watched as she stepped into her third tiara moment of 2025, each one larger, more commanding, more memorable than the last. Meanwhile, Meghan's reaction did not go unnoticed. According to palace insiders, there was an initial flicker of surprise, a flash that quickly turned into something more complex, a mixture of disbelief, tension, and envy. Imagine being trained to command attention, to always be the one in the spotlight, and then seeing someone else take the room with nothing but presence and history. That's the unique kind of pressure Meghan faced. And though she smiled for the cameras, the cracks in the facade were visible to those paying close attention. Her Hollywood charm, which once dazzled millions, suddenly seemed faint compared to the weight of centuries-old tradition resting atop Kate's head. Social media erupted almost immediately. Fans and critics alike were quick to notice the tiara's sheer size and beauty, posting photos, videos, and comparisons. Headlines screamed about Kate's historic moment and unforgettable elegance, while Meghan was described in hushed tones as flustered and distracted. Memes began to circulate, some playful, some biting, highlighting the subtle power shift. The public, it seemed, was not just watching, they were judging, dissecting, and drawing lines in the sand. Who truly held the spotlight? Who would emerge unscathed from the silent battle unfolding before their eyes? But it wasn't only the cameras and social media that captured the tension. Those closest to the events report that whispers and glances carried a weight heavier than any crown. Inside the palace, there were moments of silent calculation, of strategic positioning, and unspoken rivalry. Royal aides noted Meghan's discomfort, her attempts to remain poised, her eyes constantly flicking toward Kate. Each glance, each small reaction, was like a ripple through the room, signaling that beneath the polished smiles, the emotional stakes were sky-high. And in those fleeting moments, it became clear, this banquet was not just about diplomacy. It was about a subtle, high-stakes contest of influence and presence. Yet, the story doesn't end there. While Meghan's Hollywood fame had once guaranteed her attention, she was learning a harsh new lesson. Influence in the palace is not earned by celebrity status alone. It is earned by understanding the rules, mastering subtlety, and commanding respect through quiet power. Kate Middleton had done all of this with grace, leaving Meghan to grapple with a reality she hadn't fully anticipated. It was a public lesson, wrapped in jewels and gowns, and broadcast to the world in real time. As the evening unfolded, Meghan faced a choice. Would she step up, adapt, and find her place in this new hierarchy? Or would she retreat into familiar territory, clinging to the Hollywood persona that suddenly felt irrelevant? Those who observed the banquet say the tension was palpable, a moment frozen in time where tradition and celebrity collided, leaving one woman dazzled and another visibly unsettled. And while cameras captured smiles and laughter, the true drama played out in subtle expressions, in the pauses, and in the way the two women moved through the room, each aware of the unspoken battle for attention and influence. By the end of the night, it was clear to everyone paying attention. Kate Middleton's tiara moment was more than just a dazzling display of wealth and fashion. It was a declaration, a demonstration of royal authority, and a vivid reminder that legacy often outshines celebrity. And Meghan? She had to face a truth that would change the way she approached her royal role forever. Hollywood might bring fame, but in the hallowed halls of royalty, poise, tradition, and subtlety reigned supreme. But the night was far from over. Because what no one could predict was how Meghan would respond in the hours and days that followed, and what ripples this singular tiara moment would send through the royal family, the media, and the world at large. The German state banquet had become more than a social event. It had become a turning point, a moment that would redefine the dynamics between two of the most photographed women in the world. And the world was watching. Imagine walking into a room that has hosted the world's most powerful leaders, the most influential figures, and the most scrutinized royals, and feeling as if history itself is pressing down on your shoulders. That was the reality for everyone attending the German state banquet, a night intended to celebrate diplomacy, culture, and unity. But that would instead be remembered for something far more personal: the battle for attention between two of the most photographed women in the world. From the outside, it was glittering, serene, and perfectly orchestrated. Chandeliers sparkled like a constellation of diamonds, mirrors reflected the golden glow of candlelight, and every guest was in place, each movement choreographed to perfection. But behind the polished smiles, the whispered greetings, and the carefully folded napkins, a silent tension simmered, a tension that would explode in the most unexpected way. The banquet was no ordinary gathering. Its significance was monumental. German and British officials, royal family members, and international dignitaries had all converged on the historic halls of the German palace. Diplomacy, as always, demanded a delicate balance of appearances, etiquette, and subtle gestures. Each bow, each nod, each exchange of words carried a weight that could ripple through centuries of political tradition. And yet, for all the formalities, one element managed to overshadow every political handshake, every meticulously arranged seating plan, every speech prepared in advance: a tiara. Not just any tiara, but the largest, most extravagant one Kate Middleton had ever worn. Its presence transformed the banquet from a display of international relations into a spectacle of personal power, style, and influence. Kate's entrance was flawless. The cameras, already poised, clicked and flashed as the Duchess of Cambridge stepped into the room with the kind of calm elegance that seems effortless but is meticulously rehearsed. Her gown shimmered under the light, the fabric flowing with every step, yet it was the crown atop her head that captured every eye. The tiara's diamonds reflected the chandelier's glow, sparkling like 1,000 tiny stars, each one amplifying the aura of authority that Kate carried so naturally. For photographers, it was a dream. For Meghan Markle, it was a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. From the moment Kate appeared, the room seemed to shift. Guests instinctively turned, their eyes drawn to the tiara's brilliance, to the effortless poise she radiated. Social media exploded within minutes, images spreading faster than any formal announcement could reach the press office. Analysts, commentators, and fans dissected every angle, comparing this moment to Kate's previous tiara appearances in 2025. Each one had been memorable, but this, insiders say, was unprecedented. It was not merely a fashion statement. It was a declaration of presence, a quiet assertion that in the world of royalty, history and heritage often carry more weight than fame or celebrity. Meanwhile, Meghan's presence in the room was markedly different. Though she arrived dressed immaculately, the cameras capturing her smiles, poised gestures, and carefully measured greetings, those closest to her noticed subtle signs of discomfort. She had spent years crafting an image that merged her Hollywood persona with her royal role. She was confident in front of the cameras, at ease with public appearances, and accustomed to commanding attention. But Kate's entrance demonstrated a different kind of power, understated, historical, and deeply symbolic. The contrast was stark. Where Meghan relied on charisma and relatability, Kate relied on tradition and legacy, and on this night, it worked to perfection. It's important to understand why this moment felt so seismic. Royals are trained to recognize not just who is in the room, but the subtle signals of influence and favor. Every glance, every posture, every smile can communicate allegiance, respect, or rivalry. In such settings, even the smallest gestures carry immense weight. Kate's tiara was not merely an accessory. It was a signal, a reminder of centuries-old customs, of the monarchy's enduring hierarchy, and of her own position within it. The message was unmistakable. Elegance, history, and poise can command attention in ways fame alone never can. Palace insiders report that Meghan's reaction was complex, layered, and telling. Initially, there was surprise, the kind that comes when you realize someone else has eclipsed what you once thought was your strongest asset. That flicker quickly turned to tension. She attempted to maintain composure, smiling for photographers, engaging politely with other guests, but subtle cues betrayed her inner struggle, a tightness in her jaw, a quick glance toward Kate that lingered a second too long, hands adjusting her gown as if to reassure herself. Those paying attention could see that the Hollywood confidence she relied upon in public appearances suddenly felt insufficient in the face of historical gravitas and understated royal authority. The public was not slow to react. Within moments, social media was alive with speculation, analysis, and sometimes harsh commentary. Comparisons were drawn between the two women's appearances, their demeanor, and even the size of their respective accessories. Fans of Kate Middleton celebrated her as the embodiment of elegance and tradition. Fans of Meghan rallied to defend her, citing years of service, charitable work, and the pressures of balancing public and private life under relentless scrutiny. The headlines were immediate. Kate Middleton steals the spotlight at German state banquet. Meghan Markle overshadowed by Duchess's record-breaking tiara. Hollywood versus heritage. Who won the night? Each one framed the evening as a contest of attention, subtly emphasizing a narrative of rivalry. Yet, the cameras, the social media chatter, and the public debates captured only part of the story. Behind the scenes, the dynamics were far more intense. Royal aides, dinner planners, and security personnel reported a charged atmosphere. Noting the way Meghan's attention seemed constantly drawn to Kate, the subtle mirroring of movements, the small attempts to reclaim some degree of visibility. In a room where every gesture is magnified, these private reactions can ripple outward, influencing the tone of the evening and the perception of all who witness it. But Kate's poise remained unshaken. She moved through the banquet with a calm, controlled grace that contrasted sharply with the inner turbulence experienced by Meghan. Her conversation was measured, her laughter light but deliberate, and every gesture projected confidence without arrogance. The effect was magnetic. It was a reminder that royalty is as much about demeanor and symbolism as it is about appearances. While Meghan's Hollywood experience trained her to captivate with charisma and energy, Kate's power was quieter, yet far more enduring. It was the kind of influence that commands attention simply by being present, by existing within a lineage steeped in tradition, and by understanding the unspoken rules of the room. And yet, despite the disparity, Meghan did not fade entirely. She navigated the evening with skill, engaging with guests, offering polite laughter, and maintaining her composure in the face of what was an emotionally charged situation. But those closest to her noted the subtle undercurrent, a realization that the dynamics of fame, influence, and attention were far different within the palace than on the red carpet. Here, legacy outweighed celebrity, history outweighed hype, and quiet dignity often eclipsed loud glamour. As the night progressed, the tension became almost tangible. Observers remarked on fleeting interactions, a shared glance that lingered too long, a conversation interrupted, a toast made with measured politeness but underlying intensity. Each moment added layers to the narrative that the public could only partially perceive. And yet, it was in these layers, the silent gestures, the carefully orchestrated smiles, the micro moments of power, that the true story of the German state banquet unfolded. By the end of the evening, it was clear that the tiara had done more than adorn Kate's head. It had shifted the perception of influence, subtly realigning the balance of attention within the royal hierarchy. Meghan had come expecting to hold the spotlight, to blend her Hollywood confidence with her royal duties. Instead, she faced a moment of humbling clarity. Fame can open doors, but tradition, poise, and legacy can command rooms. And in this high-stakes environment, one dazzling tiara had communicated more than years of interviews, magazine covers, and public appearances ever could. What makes a tiara more than just a piece of jewelry? Why does a simple crown have the power to overshadow a celebrity, captivate an entire room, and even redefine public perception? At the German state banquet, Kate Middleton wore not just any tiara, she wore a statement. And in doing so, she didn't just catch the eyes of the press or the palace insiders. She broke the internet, igniting debates, memes, and viral commentary within minutes. The Duchess of Cambridge had entered history with a moment that combined elegance, heritage, and a dazzling spectacle that no one could ignore. From the moment the tiara appeared atop Kate's head, it became a central focus of attention. Its diamonds reflected the ballroom's chandeliers like a constellation of glittering stars, each stone seeming to hold centuries of stories within its facets. Palace insiders revealed that this was the largest tiara Kate had ever worn publicly, surpassing even her notable moments earlier in 2025. The sheer scale of it was remarkable, but what truly made it extraordinary was the weight of its history. This was a piece passed down through generations, its gems bearing witness to countless royal ceremonies, state functions, and private moments that have shaped the monarchy over centuries. When Kate wore it, she wasn't just accessorizing. She was stepping into a lineage, embodying a tradition, and commanding authority in a way that no modern celebrity could replicate. The immediate reaction online was overwhelming. Within moments of Kate's entrance, fans and royal watchers flooded social media platforms with images and commentary. Headlines blared. Kate Middleton stuns in largest tiara of her career. Duchess wears crown fit for a queen. History in diamonds. Kate's unforgettable moment. Memes circulated, contrasting the dazzling elegance of Kate with the more restrained, polished appearance of Meghan Markle. Some were playful, others sharp, highlighting the stark visual and symbolic contrast between Hollywood glamour and royal heritage. And while the world debated, Meghan's private discomfort was reportedly growing, a tension she could no longer mask behind practiced smiles. To understand why this tiara moment was so significant, one must look at the psychology of attention. Humans are instinctively drawn to brilliance, symmetry, and historical weight. A crown, especially one imbued with centuries of meaning, commands more than superficial admiration. It signals status, authority, and tradition. In a room filled with royalty, dignitaries, and elite observers, The tiara acted as a visual amplifier for Kate's presence. She didn't need to speak to dominate the room. Her mere posture, combined with the heritage and scale of the tiara, did the work for her. And for someone like Meghan, who had long relied on public recognition for validation, the effect was jarring. For the first time in her royal life, she found herself reacting to influence rather than wielding it. The design of the tiara was equally remarkable. Sources revealed it was crafted with an intricate lattice of platinum and gold, adorned with carefully cut diamonds that captured the light from every angle. The gemstones weren't merely decorative. They were carefully selected for their provenance, historical significance, and ability to symbolize continuity and endurance. Every curve, every arc, every embedded jewel was a subtle message. This is not a fleeting moment. This is legacy. It is power that cannot be bought, earned by charisma, or mimicked by celebrity. And Kate wore it with a quiet confidence, as if she had been born to do so. Media analysts compared the moment to previous tiara appearances by Kate. While she had wowed audiences before, this was different. Previous moments emphasized elegance and fashion sense. This one emphasized authority and permanence. It was the visual equivalent of stepping onto a stage and commanding attention without a single word. Experts noted that this particular tiara had historically been reserved for the most formal, high-profile events, signaling a new level of prominence in Kate's public role. This wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a strategic display of influence. But the real story, insiders say, wasn't just about the tiara itself. It was about the reaction it provoked, especially in Meghan Markle. Hollywood celebrities are trained to hold attention, to dominate with charisma, and to control narrative through image. Yet in the palace, the rules are different. Power is subtle, attention is earned through lineage and poise, and legacy can outweigh celebrity at a glance. Meghan, who had carefully navigated her transition from actress to princess, faced an unexpected challenge. The realization that fame outside the palace had limitations inside it. For the first time, she confronted a space where heritage trumped notoriety, and she had to recalibrate her sense of influence. The public didn't need insider insight to notice the effect. Social media platforms lit up with side-by-side comparisons of the two women. Analysts dissected their body language, posture, and the angles of their smiles. Fans debated who looked more regal, who commanded more attention, and who would be remembered. Every comment, every post, every viral thread reinforced a narrative that Meghan had been quietly displaced from the spotlight she had once assumed would always shine on her. And while some defended her, pointing to her charitable work and public appearances, the sheer visual dominance of Kate's tiara moment made a powerful impression. It was a reminder that optics, history, and symbolism often speak louder than interviews, accolades, or press campaigns. Yet the story didn't end with public perception. Palace insiders described subtle undercurrents of strategy and positioning. Meghan, aware of the attention Kate was receiving, reportedly made small adjustments, slightly shifting her stance, redirecting her smile towards certain guests, attempting to reclaim visibility. But each action seemed measured, restrained, almost defensive. Meanwhile, Kate moved with calm precision, engaging where necessary, but largely letting the tiara speak for itself. The contrast was striking. One woman wielding subtle influence rooted in tradition, the other relying on learned charisma shaped by Hollywood experience. The tiara moment also carried symbolic weight beyond the room. Within the monarchy, visual hierarchy is crucial. The size, history, and placement of a crown can signal status in ways that words cannot. By wearing this particular tiara, Kate wasn't just making a fashion choice. She was sending a clear message to those present and watching. Her position in the hierarchy is secure, her authority is recognized, and her public role carries both weight and permanence. In a subtle but undeniable way, the tiara acted as a silent declaration of influence, one that Meghan could not easily counter without understanding the same intricate codes of tradition. And then there was the international dimension. Diplomats and foreign dignitaries noticed the moment, some commenting privately on Kate's commanding presence. For them, the tiara symbolized continuity, stability, and the unbroken chain of British monarchy, a visual reassurance amid a room full of political tension and global scrutiny. Meghan, despite her global fame, found herself in a position familiar to many who enter elite spaces unprepared. Recognition is not automatic. Attention is not guaranteed. Influence is a currency earned through understanding context, history, and the subtle art of presence. By the time the banquet concluded, it was clear that the tiara had done more than dazzle. It had shifted perception, created conversation, and elevated Kate to a level of authority that transcended fashion. Meghan's Hollywood star power, while immense, could not compete with centuries of symbolism condensed into a single crown. The evening had demonstrated a fundamental truth about public life and influence. That charisma alone is not always enough, that legacy carries weight, and that in the rarefied world of royalty, visual impact can redefine narrative in an instant. But the consequences of this moment were only beginning to unfold. Because while the world celebrated Kate's historic tiara moment, Meghan's reaction behind the scenes set the stage for a sequence of events that would escalate tension, intrigue, and speculation within the palace and the media. The tiara had not just stolen the spotlight. It had ignited a silent contest of influence, one that would play out in whispers, public appearances, and social media debates for weeks to come. Imagine being adored by millions, celebrated for your talent, and regarded as a modern icon in a world obsessed with celebrity. That was Meghan Markle before she became a royal. She was Hollywood royalty long before she married into the British monarchy. A woman whose name commanded attention, whose appearances drew cameras, and whose career was marked by carefully curated narratives that earned her admiration across continents. Yet, all of that fame, all of that experience in commanding public attention, collided with a reality she hadn't fully anticipated. The world of royalty does not play by the same rules. And on the night of the German state banquet, Meghan came face to face with a truth that would forever change how she understood influence, attention, and power. In Hollywood, charisma is currency. Your presence on screen, your smile on a red carpet, or your ability to captivate an audience in interviews determines your reach. You learn to read cameras, understand lighting, and anticipate the public's reactions. You learn that applause, likes, and shares are markers of success. Meghan was a master of this system. From her role on television to her appearances at high-profile events, she knew how to command attention, how to craft an image, and how to remain poised under scrutiny. But the palace, she was discovering, operates on a different level entirely. Royalty is a game of subtlety. It's a world where lineage, symbolism, and understated poise outweigh flamboyance and spectacle. It is a world where a glance, a gesture, or the choice of a single accessory can carry more influence than an entire career in Hollywood. The German state banquet was the perfect illustration of this contrast. Kate Middleton, with her centuries of historical symbolism at her disposal, commanded attention effortlessly through tradition, legacy, and presence. Every move, every smile, and every glimmer from her tiara conveyed authority. Meanwhile, Meghan, accustomed to the applause that follows a bold entrance, realized that here, the rules were entirely different. Her celebrity, impressive as it was, could not automatically guarantee the same recognition. What makes this contrast even more intense is that Meghan had spent years preparing for this life. She knew the importance of public perception, the need to maintain poise, and the scrutiny that would follow every gesture. She had married a prince, embraced royal duties, and committed to charitable causes with the expectation that her public persona would seamlessly merge with her new role. And yet, in the presence of Kate's commanding tiara moment, all of that preparation seemed suddenly insufficient. For the first time, Meghan had to confront the reality that her fame outside the palace, which had once opened doors and captured the world's attention, was no longer enough to guarantee influence in this rarefied space. Palace insiders reported that Meghan's response to the evening was layered and complex. She attempted to project calm, to maintain her signature elegance, and to smile for the cameras. But subtle cues betrayed her internal struggle. The quick flicks of her eyes toward Kate, the adjustments of her posture, the slight tightening of her jaw. Observers noted that she appeared almost unsettled, caught between the persona she had meticulously cultivated in Hollywood and the demands of her new role as a royal under intense scrutiny. It was a study in contrast. One woman moving with serene confidence, the other grappling with an invisible, yet palpable, pressure to assert relevance. This tension was not lost on the media. Journalists covering the event noted the contrast, describing Meghan's demeanor as composed but tense, while Kate radiated a quiet authority. Social media amplified these observations, with posts comparing the two women's appearances, gestures, and even their positioning within the room. Fans debated which woman had won the night, analyzing body language, smiles, and camera angles. The comparisons, some supportive of Meghan, some critical, fueled a narrative of rivalry that had been simmering in the background but now reached a boiling point. It was a narrative that neither woman could entirely control, because in the age of instant online scrutiny, every subtle expression becomes a headline, and every interaction is dissected for meaning. What Meghan was experiencing was more than just jealousy or insecurity. It was a clash of worlds. Hollywood rewards visibility, boldness, and the ability to command attention. Royal life, by contrast, rewards discretion, lineage, and the subtle exercise of influence. In the palace, a single glance, the right posture, or a symbolic gesture can communicate power more effectively than any red carpet performance. Meghan's Hollywood instincts, smiling broadly, engaging dynamically, projecting charm, were suddenly less effective in a space where understated elegance and historical resonance carried the true weight. The shift was jarring, a reminder that influence is context-dependent and that fame, no matter how widespread, does not automatically translate into authority in every environment. Yet, Meghan did not falter entirely. She navigated the banquet with skill, engaging with dignitaries, conversing politely with other attendees, and maintaining her composure. But those close to her noticed a subtle tension in her interactions. While Kate's presence drew attention effortlessly, Meghan had to actively work to regain some degree of visibility. The contrast between natural, historical influence and the learned, performative control of celebrity was stark. And in that tension lay the drama, the intrigue, and the emotional complexity that made the evening unforgettable. It's worth considering the psychological impact of such a moment. When someone is accustomed to being at the center of attention, when their identity is intertwined with public recognition, being overshadowed, even subtly, can be destabilizing. For Meghan, who had spent years cultivating a public image that merged glamour, advocacy, and relatability, the banquet represented an unexpected challenge. She faced the reality that in this environment, heritage and tradition could eclipse charisma, and that her carefully crafted persona might not command the authority she had anticipated. It was a humbling lesson, one that few outside the palace could truly appreciate. The contrasts of the evening also highlighted broader themes of power and influence. Kate's tiara moment was a study in subtle authority. No words were required, no dramatic gestures necessary. The symbolism alone spoke volumes. In contrast, Meghan's reliance on visibility and performative confidence illustrated a different type of influence, one that shines brightly but can be fleeting when faced with centuries of tradition. The juxtaposition was not just visually striking, it was instructive, revealing the different ways in which power is expressed, perceived, and maintained in high-stakes environments. And yet, the story was not simply one of contrast. It was a turning point. Meghan's realization that Hollywood fame could not automatically translate into royal influence forced her to reconsider her approach, her strategy, and her role within the monarchy. The evening became a microcosm of the challenges she would face in the years to come, navigating attention, asserting relevance, and reconciling her public identity with the unspoken rules of a centuries-old institution. It was a moment that illuminated not just the differences between two women, but the broader tension between modern celebrity culture and the enduring power of historical tradition. By the time the German state banquet concluded, Meghan had gained clarity, albeit a difficult one. She understood that influence in this environment required more than charm or recognition. It demanded an understanding of symbolism, lineage, and the subtle dynamics of presence. Kate's tiara, while dazzling, was more than just an accessory. It was a tool, a symbol, and a statement of authority that no Hollywood fame could rival. Meghan's challenge was clear: adapt or risk being perpetually overshadowed, her public persona diluted in the brilliance of historical gravitas. And yet, as Meghan navigated the remainder of the evening, the seeds of strategy, ambition, and recalibration were already taking root. Observers noted subtle shifts in her interactions, small adjustments in posture and expression, and a heightened awareness of her surroundings. She had recognized a new type of battlefield, one where influence was negotiated through subtleties rather than overt displays. And in that recognition lay both the tension and the promise of what was to come. The banquet had ended, but the drama was far from over. Meghan Markle's Hollywood fame had met royal reality head-on, and the collision would reverberate through private conversations, public appearances, and media narratives for weeks to come. The lesson was clear. In the world of royalty, visibility is not always equivalent to influence, and the brightest star can be eclipsed by centuries of tradition. When you step into the world of royalty, you quickly learn that what happens behind palace walls rarely stays behind palace walls. Every glance, every whispered conversation, every subtle gesture can ignite rumors, spin narratives, and leak into the public domain, often with explosive consequences. And after the German state banquet, the palace was buzzing, not with praise for diplomacy or international unity, but with speculation, gossip, and a new kind of intrigue centered on one undeniable fact: Kate Middleton had stolen the show. It began almost immediately. Palace aides and insiders, bound by decades of tradition and confidentiality, noticed the tension the tiara had created. Meghan Markle, poised yet visibly unsettled, had been attempting to navigate the evening with grace, but observers saw the strain in her gestures, the quick, darting glances toward Kate, the small adjustments to her posture, the half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Staff began to whisper among themselves, recognizing the familiar signs of discomfort, a ripple that would inevitably grow. For royals, these moments are rarely private. Actions are observed, interpreted, and transmitted through a network of aides, friends, and family members. By the following morning, palace rumors had already begun to leak into the press. Stories emerged describing Meghan as distracted, flustered, and out of her element, while Kate was celebrated for commanding the room and shining with historical authority. Headlines blared across tabloids, online news outlets, and social media platforms. Kate Middleton overshadows Meghan Markle at state banquet. Duchess wears tiara fit for a queen. Meghan left in shadows. Hollywood star meets royal reality and struggles. Within hours, these narratives had been amplified by commentators, bloggers, and fans worldwide. The palace's controlled environment had suddenly collided with the uncontrollable power of the internet. But the leaks were more than just media chatter. Sources suggest that certain palace aides, loyal to Kate and aligned with her vision for public perception, may have strategically allowed information to slip. Every subtle observation, every behind-the-scenes note, fed a narrative. Kate was poised, confident, and fully aware of her power. Meghan, for all her Hollywood glamour, was being subtly overshadowed. Whether intentional or accidental, the effect was undeniable. In a matter of hours, a private evening became a public spectacle, and Meghan's response, or lack thereof, became part of a growing story. Inside the palace, these leaks created tension beyond what the public could see. Conversations between staff, advisors, and family members were fraught with unspoken concerns. How would Meghan respond to the narrative? Would she push back publicly, retreat quietly, or attempt to reclaim her influence behind the scenes? Insiders noted that she was reportedly visibly frustrated in private meetings, her expressions revealing the internal calculations that Hollywood experience had taught her to perform subtly in public but could not fully conceal when emotions ran high. The stakes were real. In this world, public perception matters as much as personal relationships, and a single misstep, or even a perception of misstep, can resonate for months or years. Adding to the intrigue were social media reactions. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became lightning rods for speculation and debate. Fans dissected every photograph, every angle, every captured expression. Memes proliferated, some playful, some biting, contrasting Meghan's Hollywood persona with Kate's historic elegance. Analysts highlighted the body language differences, noting how Kate's calm authority seemed to dwarf Meghan's performative gestures. The public was enthralled, consuming the narrative as if watching a high-stakes drama unfold in real time. And while Meghan had always been skilled at managing her image, this was a new arena. One where centuries of tradition, symbolism, and subtle hierarchy amplified even the smallest gestures. The leaks also exposed a fascinating dynamic within the royal household. According to insiders, some aides were deeply concerned about the potential fallout. Rumors of jealousy, rivalry, and tension between the two duchesses began to circulate. Conversations that were once private, tactical, and quiet suddenly gained new layers of meaning as they were interpreted, shared, and even exaggerated. Staff members became silent strategists, carefully considering how their words and actions might be perceived by both the family and the public. Every comment could become a headline, and every reaction could be scrutinized in a way that few outside the palace could fully appreciate. What made these leaks particularly significant was their timing. They didn't just emerge days or weeks after the event. They surfaced almost immediately, shaping the narrative while emotions were still raw. Analysts observed that by the time Meghan had returned home from the banquet, the public perception was already forming. Kate had triumphed in a subtle, visual battle for attention, while Meghan was portrayed as reacting rather than leading. For someone accustomed to being in control of narrative, someone who had mastered the art of public storytelling, this was a rare and uncomfortable moment. But it wasn't just the press or the public that took note. Other members of the royal family, though careful to maintain composure publicly, reportedly discussed the evening in private. Conversations, according to insiders, ranged from strategic assessments of public perception to considerations of family dynamics and loyalty. Meghan's reactions, gestures, and subtle expressions were analyzed for clues about her confidence, her temperament, and her potential strategy moving forward. Every movement at the banquet became fodder for interpretation, a reminder that in royal life, nothing is ever truly private. The palace rumors didn't stop at mere observation. They began to shape behavior. Meghan reportedly started adjusting her appearances, her public engagements, and even her interactions with staff. Small gestures, whether it was a way of standing, a slight change in posture, or the timing of her smiles, were carefully recalibrated. Meanwhile, Kate's team reportedly reinforced her presence with subtle, strategic positioning, ensuring that public perception remained favorable. In a world where optics can influence power, these behind-the-scenes adjustments carry immense weight, setting the stage for long-term shifts in influence and public narrative. And then there was the human element. Meghan, despite her experience with media scrutiny, was reportedly affected emotionally by the combination of the tiara moment and the rapid spread of rumors. Sources suggest she experienced a mix of frustration, disbelief, and determination, an emotional cocktail that highlighted the tension between Hollywood's self-assurance and the intricate, often invisible hierarchies of palace life. It's one thing to manage a public image when you control the narrative. It's another entirely when centuries of tradition, symbolism, and heritage influence perception more than charisma ever could. By the end of the week, the palace leaks had set off a media storm. Analysts dissected every angle. Commentators speculated endlessly about underlying tensions, and the public debated endlessly about who truly won the night. For Meghan, the challenge was clear: navigate a world where history, symbolism, and subtle influence often outweigh the power of fame. The German state banquet was no longer just an event. It had become a lesson in perception, power, and the consequences of underestimating the subtle rules of royal life. And yet, as the rumors continued to swirl, one thing was certain: the evening had changed everything. The tiara had not only elevated Kate Middleton in the eyes of the public, it had exposed the vulnerabilities, pressures, and limitations that Meghan Markle would have to confront. What started as a glittering, ceremonial moment had become a turning point in the ongoing story of influence, perception, and rivalry within the royal family. The palace leaks, the social media uproar, and the private calculations all converged to create a tense, unpredictable environment. Meghan's next steps would determine not just her public perception, but her standing within the family and her ability to navigate a world defined by centuries of unspoken rules. The stakes were high, the audience vast, and the consequences potentially enduring. As the dust settled from the German state banquet, one thing became abundantly clear. The cameras and headlines were no longer interested in diplomacy, international relations, or the sparkling evening itself. They were interested in one thing only: Meghan Markle versus Kate Middleton. The media frenzy that erupted in the hours and days following the event was nothing short of extraordinary, a perfect storm of speculation, analysis, and relentless scrutiny that would dominate headlines for weeks. From the moment the images of Kate's tiara hit social media, journalists, influencers, and pundits scrambled to interpret the significance. Every angle of every photograph was analyzed, every facial expression dissected, every gesture measured. Headlines screamed for attention. Kate Middleton's tiara moment leaves Meghan in shadows. Hollywood star meets royal authority. Who won? Duchess clash, tiara edition. The public, hungry for drama, consumed every post, tweet, and article, eager to witness what they perceived as a royal showdown. What made this frenzy so intense was the underlying narrative it seemed to confirm. For years, the media had played up contrasts between Meghan and Kate. Celebrity versus tradition, outsider versus insider, Hollywood glamour versus royal poise. Now, a single event crystallized these narratives into a visual spectacle. Kate's enormous, historically significant tiara had captured not just the attention of those in the room, but the imagination of a global audience. Meanwhile, Meghan's reaction, polite smiles, calculated gestures, fleeting glances, was interpreted by some as discomfort, insecurity, or even envy. The story practically wrote itself. Television coverage was relentless. Royal correspondents replayed footage of the entrance, comparing Meghan and Kate side by side. Panel discussions debated body language, attire, and subtle signals of influence. Experts in royal protocol offered commentary, explaining why a tiara could communicate more power than charisma alone. Some commentators praised Meghan for maintaining composure under pressure, while others suggested that she had been outshone in a high-profile moment that the public would remember for decades. Every statement, no matter how measured, fed into the growing frenzy, amplifying speculation and driving engagement to unprecedented levels. Social media platforms became battlefields. Fans of Kate posted images highlighting her elegance, her poise, and the sheer scale of the tiara, emphasizing the Duchess's mastery of tradition and symbolism. Fans of Meghan defended her, pointing out her charitable work, her advocacy, and her ability to navigate the pressures of public life while remaining authentic. The comment sections were filled with debates, memes, and GIFs that exaggerated perceived contrasts, often turning subtle gestures into supposed proof of rivalry. Within hours, the hashtags #TeamKate and #TeamMeghan were trending worldwide, fueling endless cycles of engagement, commentary, and opinion. What few outside observers fully grasped, however, was the personal impact this media frenzy had on Meghan herself. Hollywood had taught her to manage attention, spin narratives, and present a carefully curated public image. But the palace operates differently. Here, lineage, symbolism, and historical precedents carry weight in ways that fame alone cannot match. Meghan was suddenly confronted with a reality she had not fully experienced in Hollywood. Influence is not always about visibility, and being the center of attention does not automatically equate to authority. Her image, her gestures, and her every movement were being scrutinized in a way that made traditional media training almost irrelevant. Insiders reported that Meghan spent hours reviewing coverage, analyzing photographs, and discussing appearances with her advisors. Each detail was examined for how it might be perceived, how it could be leveraged, and how it might reinforce or undermine her position within the family and the public eye. While she had faced intense media scrutiny before, this was different. The stakes were higher, the scrutiny sharper, and the narrative far more complex. The focus wasn't just on her. It was on the tension she shared with Kate, a juxtaposition that captivated audiences and fueled speculation. Even seemingly minor details were amplified. The angle of Meghan's head in a photograph, the placement of her hands during a conversation, the way she smiled at another guest, all became evidence in a global conversation about influence, poise, and hierarchy. Meanwhile, Kate's tiara, with its historical weight and visual impact, was repeatedly highlighted as a symbol of enduring power, tradition, and elegance. The contrast between the two women's approaches, Hollywood showmanship versus royal gravitas, became the lens through which the media framed every discussion. This frenzy was not limited to traditional media. Influencers, bloggers, and social media personalities joined the conversation, posting videos, commentary, and reaction threads that dissected every moment of the banquet. TikTok creators produced side-by-side comparisons. YouTube channels released detailed breakdowns of gestures, outfits, and accessories, and Instagram feeds exploded with curated images emphasizing the Duchess showdown. The narrative was self-perpetuating, with each post referencing the last, creating a feedback loop that magnified speculation and ensured that the story remained at the forefront of public consciousness. And yet, amidst the frenzy, the palace remained careful. Official statements were measured, emphasizing decorum, diplomacy, and the success of the banquet as a whole. No comment directly addressed the perceived tension between Meghan and Kate, leaving the media and public to fill in the gaps. In a way, this silence was strategic. By not responding, the palace allowed the visual narrative to speak for itself, reinforcing the perception that Kate had triumphed in a subtle but undeniable way. Meanwhile, Meghan's advisors had to navigate a delicate balance, managing her public image without fueling the ongoing speculation or creating further controversy. The media frenzy also revealed a fascinating psychological dynamic, the public's obsession with contrast. People are naturally drawn to stories of rivalry, tension, and competition, particularly when they involve iconic figures. Meghan versus Kate was not just a story about two women. It was a story about identity, perception, and the intersection of modern celebrity culture with centuries-old tradition. Audiences were captivated because the stakes felt personal, the drama immediate, and the outcome uncertain. Every article, tweet, or post became a microdrama, with readers and viewers positioning themselves on one side or the other, as if they were spectators in a centuries-long royal saga. But the frenzy was not without consequences. According to insiders, the intensity of media scrutiny placed considerable pressure on both duchesses. Meghan reportedly felt compelled to analyze and recalibrate her approach to public appearances, carefully considering how every gesture might be interpreted in the context of ongoing comparisons. Kate, while exuding confidence, was not immune to awareness of the narrative, ensuring that her presence continued to reinforce authority, elegance, and poise. In this environment, even subtle actions could have long-term implications for public perception, influence within the family, and the broader reputation of the monarchy. The media frenzy reached a climax when international coverage began to focus not just on the banquet, but on the broader implications of Meghan and Kate's contrasting styles. News outlets explored the tension between Hollywood fame and royal tradition, debating how each woman navigates the pressures of visibility, influence, and public expectation. Analysts highlighted the role of symbolism in royal life, noting that gestures, accessories, and even posture can carry meaning far beyond their superficial appearance. And as coverage expanded, the story grew, feeding a global audience eager for intrigue, insight, and drama. By the end of this initial media storm, one fact was undeniable. The German state banquet had become a defining moment in the ongoing narrative of Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton. The tiara, the gestures, the photographs, and the public perception all converged to create a story that captivated the world. For Meghan, the experience was a stark reminder that Hollywood fame, while powerful, operates under different rules than royal influence. And for Kate, the evening reinforced her ability to command attention through tradition, presence, and subtle displays of authority. Yet, even as the media frenzy raged, the story was far from over. Each article, each social media post, each analysis would influence how both women approached future appearances, public engagements, and private interactions. The stakes had been raised, the audience had been captivated, and the subtle contest for influence and perception had only just begun. And what came next? The private calculations, strategic adjustments, and escalating tension between Hollywood celebrity and royal tradition would push the story into even more dramatic territory. The German state banquet had ended, the cameras had stopped clicking, and the glittering chandeliers had dimmed, but the tension between Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton did not. What the public witnessed in photographs, what the media amplified into a frenzy, was only the surface. Behind closed doors, within the quiet hallways and private rooms of the palace, a confrontation of influence, identity, and power was quietly taking shape. A confrontation that would reveal much more than public appearances ever could. It started subtly. Sources describe Meghan entering the private quarters with a carefully measured composure, but with a tension that was impossible to ignore. Staff noted that she moved deliberately, her posture straight, her smile composed but taut. In the corridors where cameras could not reach, whispers circulated. Meghan had been disturbed by Kate's performance at the banquet, by the way her tiara had captivated attention, and by the way the world had reacted. In that moment, Meghan realized that she could no longer rely solely on public perception or her Hollywood experience. She was now in a space where subtle gestures carried more weight than charisma alone. Kate, meanwhile, remained calm. Sources suggest that she was fully aware of the impact she had made and of Meghan's likely reaction. But rather than confront the moment with theatrics, Kate maintained a measured, almost serene demeanor. Her posture, her gaze, and the very way she carried herself signaled authority and poise. In private, Kate's advisors reportedly reminded her that history, symbolism, and composure were her greatest tools. Every interaction was deliberate, every word carefully chosen, every expression part of a larger strategy of influence. The confrontation, when it came, was not explosive in the dramatic sense the public might imagine. There were no shouting matches, no raised voices, no public displays of anger. Instead, it was a battle of subtle signals, emotional undercurrents, and strategic positioning. Meghan, aware that Kate had once again stolen the show, reportedly attempted to assert herself through conversation, body language, and carefully crafted remarks. But Kate, guided by experience, remained poised, neutral, and unshakable. The exchange, while brief, revealed the deeper tensions between Hollywood fame and royal tradition, between learned charisma and inherited authority. Insiders report that the air was charged with a mix of frustration, calculation, and unspoken understanding. Meghan reportedly felt the pressure of maintaining composure while simultaneously asserting relevance. Every glance toward Kate, every shift in posture, every carefully timed smile was part of a silent negotiation for attention, influence, and control of the narrative. Kate, by contrast, relied on the subtle power of presence. She did not need to dominate the room with words or gestures. Her authority was embedded in tradition, lineage, and the symbolism she embodied. The private confrontation extended beyond the duchesses themselves. Staff, aides, and advisors became silent observers, carefully navigating their roles to avoid exacerbating tensions while ensuring that protocol and decorum were maintained. Every action taken by Meghan or Kate was interpreted, analyzed, and, in some cases, subtly influenced by those who understood the stakes. The palace, though physically quiet, was a hive of strategic maneuvering, where perception and optics were paramount. What made this confrontation particularly fascinating was the psychological dimension. Meghan, accustomed to a world where visibility and charisma guaranteed attention, found herself operating under a new set of rules. Influence in the palace was not simply about being seen. It was about the resonance of presence, the weight of tradition, and the ability to command respect without overt assertion. For someone whose identity had long been intertwined with public recognition, the realization was destabilizing. The tiara, the banquet, the media frenzy, all of it converged into a stark lesson. In this world, fame alone could not dictate outcomes. Sources suggest that Meghan attempted multiple strategies to reclaim control of the private narrative. She sought subtle forms of validation from staff, engaged in careful conversations designed to redirect attention, and experimented with gestures and expressions meant to assert poise and confidence. But Kate's composed presence, The symbolic power of her tiara and her mastery of royal etiquette acted as counterweights. Each move Meghan made was met with calm neutrality, creating a dynamic in which the pressure was increasingly on her to adapt rather than the other way around. The emotional stakes were high. Insiders described Meghan as experiencing a complex mix of frustration, determination, and even disbelief. She was confronted with a reality she had not fully anticipated, that Hollywood influence, while powerful in its own sphere, had limitations within a system that valued heritage, symbolism, and subtle authority. The private confrontation was, in many ways, a crucible, forcing Meghan to confront her vulnerabilities, recalibrate her approach, and reevaluate how she could assert herself in a world where the rules were both explicit and unspoken. Meanwhile, Kate's strategy remained clear. By maintaining calm composure and embodying the symbolic authority of her role, she reinforced both her public and private position. Observers noted the contrast between the two women. One negotiating influence through learned performance, the other wielding authority that was quietly inherent. The juxtaposition was striking, almost cinematic, highlighting the enduring tension between modern celebrity culture and centuries-old tradition. The private confrontation also had implications beyond the two duchesses. Advisors, staff, and other family members recognized the potential impact of these dynamics on broader family relations, public perception, and future engagements. The stakes were not personal alone, they were institutional. How Meghan and Kate navigated this tension could shape the monarchy's image, influence the media narrative, and even affect diplomatic interactions. Every gesture, word, and look was a data point in a complex web of relationships and perceptions. According to insiders, the conversation, or series of exchanges, did not resolve tensions but instead laid the groundwork for future dynamics. Meghan began to understand that asserting influence in this environment required more than visibility or charisma. It required mastery of symbolism, subtlety, and the long game. Kate, in turn, reinforced her understanding that presence, composure, and historical resonance could shape perception without overt action. The private confrontation became less about overt conflict and more about the nuanced negotiation of power and influence. By the end of that evening, both women had emerged with clarity, albeit in different ways. Meghan had recognized the limitations of fame within a system that prioritizes tradition.